Let's go through some of these and give me your numbers. You got a lot of good numbers here. West Virginia Senate primaries. You had an imaginary matchup between Capito and McKinley. What did you come up with?
You came up with a really sizable lead for Capito, which I think was frankly a bit unexpected. McKinley has run some pretty high profile races, has built a reputation, but just doesn't seem to match up. I think the real story there is that Capito leads McKinley in his own first congressional district, 46-33. So I think as his career continues to move along, proving his strength in his own congressional district statewide will be important.
Overall, in a head-to-head, you had Capito at 70%, McKinley at about 15%, and then about 15% not sure or undecided. But as you said, a key point, you had Capito even ahead of McKinley in the first. Now, what about Capito? You did a Capito-Morrissey matchup. That was interesting. The Attorney General, you had Capito 73%, Morrissey about 10%, not sure 17%. Obviously, Capito much better known than Morrissey. Let's go over to this Democratic Senate primary. You made up a race there with 3rd District Congressman Nick Rahall, State Supreme Court Justice Robin Davis, and with Cart Goodwin, who served briefly in the Senate in 2010. What did you come up with there? What stood out to you?
Yeah, we found that Nick Rahall is up sizably in a hypothetical primary there at 38%. Robin Davis comes in second at 17%, and Cart Goodwin at about 8%. Congressman Rahall's strength statewide is really driven out of his home 3rd district there, where he leads Davis and Goodwin respectively 61-14 and 7. Interestingly, among Democratic voters here, of course, one of Rahall's strongest constituencies are voters who say that coal and energy should be the state's top issue. He wins those voters by 49%. So I think it's clear that for Democrats, Rahall certainly appears to be the strongest candidate at this point.
Okay. Top issues. What did you find when you asked voters what the top issues were in West Virginia?
Yeah, a little bit dispersed here. Jobs still comes in number one at 25%. We ask the economy as a separate question from jobs because I think they are two. I think people think about two different things when they think about the economy at large and jobs in particular. Economy comes in second at 23%. Bringing in coal and energy would come in third at 17%.
Brock McCleary is with us with Harper Polling. They have some numbers out, kind of a snapshot on where West Virginia is and possible matchups in 2014. Ideology, I've seen this number repeated many times. It varies a little bit, but we know once again West Virginia is a very conservative, is an at least conservative state, and in many cases a very conservative state.
Yes, very conservative. Also, by registration, very Democratic, but by ideology, 28% consider themselves very conservative. The somewhat conservatives are actually the largest group at 32%. Moderates, a sizable number of moderates at 28%. Those who call themselves liberal, however, down into about the 8% range.
Still, though, you put those two together, you have 60% of West Virginians who fall on the conservative side.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Let me look ahead here. And so you also created an imaginary matchup with Capito and Rahall in the Senate race in 2014. Capito's definitely in. Rahall has said on this program he's thinking about it. What did you find there?
We find her with a pretty healthy lead, frankly. About 50%. Rahall comes in. Of the three challengers, Rahall clearly does the best at 32%. So he starts at a deficit. Now I will point out, obviously, 18% are undecided, so there is a long way to go. But I do think that it's interesting that two members of Congress who served for a while, start a statewide race with one having such a sizable lead. It really comes down to the fact that Shelley Moore Capito does very, very well in her second district. She beats Rahall 61-27. The problem for Rahall here is that in his home 3rd district, he, however, trails Shelley Moore Capito by 1%. And so I think that, if I'm Rahall, I look at that as a good thing, and I say, listen, I can turn those numbers around in my home district. I've been taking a beating in the last couple of House campaigns, but I can repair that. But that will be the central question for him if he runs statewide can he improve his numbers in his own district?
Well, there's a lot of Democrats in southern West Virginia. I mean, the population's been declining, but in some counties, as you probably know, Brock, it's 8-1, 9-1, 12-1 Democrats. So the key there, if whoever's running, if they can get those people to go vote, it helps them dramatically.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you're a Democrat, there is a far larger pool of voters that you can go pull out to really change an election in a quick way. Republicans just don't have that opportunity.
And you also had a imaginary matchup: Capito Goodwin, Capito Davis, and again, Capito has a sizable advantage there. You have in Capito Goodwin the Congresswoman with 53%. Cart Goodwin with 19%, 28%, just not sure. And some of that's reflective, too, I would guess, Brock, and that people just don't know who Cart Goodwin is. I mean, some do in the Kanawha Valley, but beyond that, you're not going to get a lot of people know who he is.
No, about half of the state, has never heard of him. He served for a few years, or for a few months, rather, in the Senate after the late, great Senator Byrd passed. I'm sure that was a very important experience for him. Unfortunately, he comes out of that with not a lot of name identification, and those who do know him are kind of split. About 13% have a favorable opinion, 14% have an unfavorable opinion. So I think he's still a candidate to watch, because if Rahal takes a pass, this may be an opportunity for him to jump to the front of the line for a statewide run.
Capito Davis, Robin Davis actually does a little better than Cart Goodwin does.
Sure, and I was a bit surprised here, but she does have a fair amount of name identification. She's actually the only Democrat that really has a pretty decent image rating, where she is at 27% favorable and 15% unfavorable. So she's a pretty good start here. She's not, able to close the race among women with Shelley Moore Capito, 49-23. But again, as you point out, a lot of that is attributed to her lower name identification overall.
Brock McCleary is with us with Harper Polling on some poll numbers out today concerning 2014. I think if you're Capito, and again, I want to caution that this is very early. Nobody's done any advertising. A lot of this is probably name recognition. So, and I don't want to dismiss your polling, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, it's early, and this is like, who do you know? Maybe more.
That is absolutely right. You're spot on. A lot of it is driven by name identification. Now, of course, electoral politics to some degree driven by name identification. So there is, it is the head start that Capito has is real, and it would be difficult to overcome. But I think the important thing to remember about Capito is that she has not had many tough campaigns in a while, and so you contrast that with Nick Rahal, who, National Republicans have been running ads in the Charleston media market for going on 2 cycles now, beating him up, and so he wears a little bit of that.
Right.
Where she doesn't. She just hasn't had much negative ads run against
her. So nobody's saying anything bad about her. So at some point, I would imagine if anybody's thinking about getting in this race, Republican or Democrat, they're going to poll and they're going to find out the same kind of thing. But they're going to then say, if you knew this, especially among soft supporters, if you knew this, and I'm not talking about a push poll, but if you know that Capito voted this way, what would you think? And those numbers might change dramatically.
Yeah, no, and that is not a push poll. I mean, that is essentially what campaigns do. They go and they test different messages against their opponent and see what moves votes. Now, so the big question, and probably what we need to look at the second go-around, is figure out what kind of those pushes might be against Rahal, what would the pushes be against Capito, and see whether they can move voters.
I think, though, if you're Capito, even though this is an early snapshot, you look at it, and the key here, one key, Brock, is you see a lot of numbers that are 50% or above. And when you're at that level, that's a good place to start. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't see how you can be disappointed with this. If you're her, I mean, she, frankly, against Rahal, she's winning women 50-31. I mean, I don't know another Republican anywhere in the country that's winning women like that. So, there is reason to believe that there's a lot of real strength there behind her. But there's yet a campaign to be run.
Brock McCleary, final question for you, Brock. Do you think, or do you know, that there are conservative Republicans nationwide and in West Virginia who do not think Capito is a conservative enough Republican? They've been fishing around for a candidate. What are the odds, in your opinion, that more conservative Republicans will find a candidate to challenge Capito from the right? And well, that's the second question after that. Let me start there.
Well, listen, I think it's usually never very difficult to find someone to run for the Senate. Whether you can find a candidate who can really raise enough money and execute an effective primary campaign against her, however, is an entirely different story. So I would guess that you could get a name on a ballot. Can you raise $500,000 to $1 million to execute a primary campaign that has a chance of winning? I just don't know that.
And on the Democratic side, not only in West Virginia but in Washington, certainly the Democratic Party nationally has to look at this and go, wow, we're losing Rockefeller, so we got to fight like dogs here to try to hold that seat. And I would imagine they'll play a big role in 2014 nationally to get somebody in.
Yeah, no question. No question. It will take a lot of help. I mean, however, as you know, these Senate races never lack for spending from outside groups. But if they're going to make a hold in West Virginia for Rockefeller's seat, looking at this poll would tell you it's going to carry a pretty big price tag.
Brock McCleary with Harper Polling with the numbers. We'll post on our website. Brock, it's good stuff, and I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.